All right, let's get to the shout out.
Let's get to the shout out. Shout out, shout out.
Creepy.
Shout out, shout out, shout out.
Weird.
I think that's creepy.
It's incredible.
Shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out.
Why is Alex Jones so fucking funny?
Shout out, shout out.
This is out of control.
Really is
I
funny.
really miss him.
I kind of miss him too. That really is though a testament to such profound cynicism, right?
I know. I realized it as soon as I said it that some people get so mad at me for my love of Alex Jones. I get it. He's a bad guy, but he's a character. Man.
Yeah, don't get mad about that. That's a little ridiculous.
Somebody was upset that we haven't been updating as much on Alex Jones.
He's not in the game,
But
guys.
like for instance, there's some stuff with the Sandy Hill lawsuit, I believe.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook, yeah, sorry.
I think they got rights to his documents.
Yeah, got to go into Discovery. That's all good. But
That's
the
great.
main reason we were covering him was, well, number one, it was good YouTube content, but also number two, he was on YouTube and he was like a public sort of figure. I mean, if he does something amazing, we'll play it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, guys, ironically, one of the reasons that we're not like a pure entertainment channel, like at all, like even the bullshit that we do still should have some overlap with like the discourse. So, you know, there's some people like, yeah, there was a time where Alex Jones puts out these hilarious, hysterical, and horrific videos, and Donald Trump is on his show, and he's one of the indisputed kings of new media. It's not the case anymore. Bless you. Davos happened. Davos is a confab. I believe it started in the early 1990s, where the elites meet to coordinate policy, where Tim Cook takes a picture with Jair Bolsonaro. It's emblematic of all of the problems of our world. A very specific, I mean, maybe not all, because it is definitely more of the, what Bill Fletcher Jr. would say, the authoritarian neoliberal than the right-wing populism. And I have no doubt smart and interesting people have always been invited to Davos, but this is actually a positive democratizing effect of social media. If you were at Davos several years ago, one, the context is different. You're not coming off of all of these mass movements and the Sanders campaign and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, so you're operating in a different global political context.
Do you remember what Davos was like after the recession?
There was a little bit, if I recall, it was more liberally. It was a little bit of like we need to have like a panel about, got to help people out a little bit. And for what it's worth, like, Davos is a pretty third way event. It wasn't like, these are not people that are these. I mean, I'm sure there's fascists, there's everybody's there, but it isn't like the ethos would be much more of like it's pure 1990s. So there's some room for like tiny social safety nets, but certainly not like democratizing the economy. And they always had people there who would, were supposed to provide some intellectual heft. But, if you're in a room of billionaires and heads of state and pop stars, you're probably, first of all, you're less likely to challenge it if it just stays in the room and on some boring C-SPAN live stream. You can go into the archives. It's unbelievable. Look, it's like Bill Gates, Thabo Mbeki, and Bono talk about African debt type of stuff. But now the political environment we're in is very different thanks to those forces, material and political, that I mentioned before. And social media makes your calculus of how you use these events radically different. So Anand Giridharadas exposed it's hard. The idea of exposing Bill Gates and Tony Blair is kind of hilarious. Everybody should know what they are, but he did, in fact, piss them off, and they threw their little tantrums. And then this thing happened on taxes with what's his name again?
Rutger Bregman.
Rutger Bregman.
This is my first time at Davos, and I find it quite a bewildering experience, to be honest. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about, how we're wrecking the planet. And I hear people talk in the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency. But then, almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water, right? there was only one panel, actually.
Well, we've had two. You're the second of our panelists.
There was only one panel.
Let's go there.
That was the other panel. Was the Michael Dell got a question from an economics reporter from the Washington Post who was so illiterate on economics that she apparently, and I still say apparently because I actually can have a hard time conceiving that she could be this ill-equipped for her job. She apparently thought that there were progressive tax rates in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was literally slashing them down to, I think, 28%. I think Bill Clinton knocked that back up to about 30% or 32%. So you had an economic illiterate ask an oligarch if he should buy into AOC's eminently reasonable and moderate 70% after $10 million of income proposal. He said, that would never work. And then a professor from MIT did the Marshall McLuhan moment in the Woody Allen movie where Marshall McLuhan steps out from behind the poster and is like, I actually am Marshall McLuhan. You've completely misinterpreted my work. And he did one place it worked was the United States. And of course, we wanted to add a little Bernie flair to it. We could say, right now in Denmark and Sweden, there's high tax rates. So that was the one moment. And it was mostly, there was a lot of value in Michael Dell looking like a jackass.
One panel hidden away in the media center that was actually about tax avoidance. Yeah. I was one of the 15 participants. So something needs to change here. I mean, 10 years ago, the World Economic Forum asked the question, what must industry do to prevent a broad social backlash? The answer is very simple. Just stop talking about philanthropy and start talking about taxes. Taxes. We need to, just 2 days ago, there was a billionaire in here, what's his name? Michael Dell. And he asked the question like, name me one country where a top marginal tax rate of 70% has actually worked. And, I'm a historian. The United States, that's where it has actually worked. In the 1950s, during Republican President Eisenhower, the war veteran, the top marginal tax rate in the US was 91% for people like Michael Dell. The top estate tax for people like Michael Dell was more than 70%. This is not rocket science. We can talk for a very long time about all these stupid philanthropy schemes. We can invite Bono once more.
That's the best part.
Come on, we got to be talking about taxes. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Taxes. All the rest is bullshit, in my opinion.
Well, of course, that's 100% right. I don't know if let's play this on. So, eminently sensible, eminently obvious, it's beautiful, but it's depressing because this stuff should be like, this should have been solved like hundreds of years ago. But anyways, of course, this led to a tantrum from a resident oligarch, a former CFO of Yahoo. What's this guy's name? I think he identifies himself, but I know he's a former CFO of Yahoo. And
it's Ken Goldman.
Well, Ken Goldman has got some whining to do.
Honestly, this is a very one-sided panel. The U.S. basically has the lowest unemployment rate ever, the lowest black unemployment rate ever, the lowest youth unemployment ever. We've actually reduced poverty around the world. No one's talking about that at all. So I'd like the panel to talk about beyond taxes, which every one of you have talked about. The only thing you've talked about in this whole panel on inequality, what can we really do to help solve inequality over time beyond taxes?
The gentleman who talked about...
This is Whiny Byanyima, and she's I'm apologizing the last name. She's Ugandan. I believe she's a former aeronautical engineer, and she is the Oxfam International Executive Director who puts out those inequality reports. So she's one of like a handful of excellent people at this forum, and she's going to very politely and with a lot more class than we would put this jackass in his place.
Make him the chief officer of getting owned.
Yeah, exactly.
Taxes.
The gentleman who said we've just talked taxes and that jobs are there and there's low and unemployment rates are low. Let me tell you something. We're talking about jobs, but the quality of those jobs. And we also work with poultry workers in the richest country in the world, the United States. Poultry workers. These are women who are cutting the chickens and packing them, and we buy them in the supermarkets. Dolores, one woman we work with there, told us that she and her co-workers have to wear diapers to work because they are not allowed toilet breaks. This is in the richest country in the world. That's not a dignified job. Those are the jobs we are being told about, that globalization is bringing jobs. The quality of the jobs matter. It matters. These are not jobs of dignity. In many countries, workers no longer have a voice. They are not allowed to unionize. They are not allowed to negotiate for salaries. So we're talking about jobs, but jobs that bring dignity. We're talking about healthcare. The World Bank has told us that 3.4 billion people who earn $5.5 a day are on the verge, are just a medical bill away from sinking into poverty. They don't have health care. They are just a crop failure away from sinking back into poverty. They have no crop insurance. So don't tell me about low levels of unemployment. You are counting the wrong things. You're not counting dignity of people. You're counting exploited people.
I have nothing to add to that other than potentially some impression of that guy being like, bitch.
Yeah, get some, Goldman.
You know,
yeah.
It's just an interesting tidbit for somebody.
That was fucking beautiful.
An asshole like that CFO is to talk about a group of people that have very much developed over the past 20, 30 years. You look at the American economy, and the CFO position was actually very rare for companies for most of American history. It's only in the 90s and like 2000s when it expands. And what do you see there? You see a contraction of wages for workers. You see more and more companies being involved in 10, 100, 1,000 subsidiaries, very confusing relationships. So
managing the new bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Managing
so when we're
the
talking
bureaucracy
about
of neoliberalism.
Exactly. So when we're talking about this, that's why this guy is so worried about people challenging the status quo.
Yeah,
of the past 30
he's
years.
a over-glorified paper shuffler whose very function is a symbolization of all of the problems of our time. Yeah. And he's whining. And I have to say, even archetypally, there is something hilarious about getting and I don't like the left anti-American shit, so I avoid it. But there is something hysterical about whiny American oligarch gets co-owned by Ugandan Oxfam executive director and unassuming Scandinavian academic. There's something hilarious just about the ecosystem of that co-ownage.
I think they have no idea how to behave anymore either.
No.
He was not expecting that woman to say you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
No, he was expecting no, that's exactly it, because he was expecting her to and I think that this would very recently potentially be the case. All right, well, this guy's an asshole. He has no idea what he's talking about, but I'm at Davos. What about donors? What about, oh, man, how do I do it? Versus just dude, people in the United States working for Purdue are wearing diapers. What the fuck are you talking about, you spoiled brat? Shut the fuck up. Fuck you. And I think that next week, this weekend, the illicit history is going to be with brilliant Nigerian British writer Ralph Leonard, using CLR James to critique identity politics and talk about economics, but actually as a doorway for this sort of the positive globalization project that I'm committed to, and that is actually going to be forming a major part of the answer to this IDW garbage in my book. But next week I'm doing illicit history with Zach Carter on the 1990s, and and it will be a compliment to the Third Way illicit history. And it's he just wrote this great column, being Howard Schultz's whole campaign and all of these guys is just this whiny, plaintive call to go back to 1995, when just their raw selfishness and self-interest was just the received wisdom of the day. And they don't know how to behave, and they don't know how to answer anything because they literally don't know anything. I mean, I think I'm quite sure that Michael Dell actually didn't know the Eisenhower tax rates, let alone not being able to have an answer for it. He didn't know that shit.
Just like Howard Schultz didn't know why it's incongruous that he would cite FDR as his favorite Democratic president.
Right.
They have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
No idea what the fuck they're talking about. And that's why they just latch onto these cliches. And it's also beautiful. I mean, this is another, by the way, an impact of having a real left presence too, because it's like, look, in a relative political fight, I get it is important to say Obama stopped the bleeding from Bush and added this amount of jobs. Like, you need to say that in a 2012 reelect campaign, no doubt. But when you have a left political presence, we can come along and say, actually, if anything, people work way too much. And what about the quality of those jobs? And what about people having power over their economic lives? Like, those stats mean very little, and they never mean what those people think they mean. You just enjoyed that Michael Brooks Show video, and you can get a lot more by subscribing to us here at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel. It's literally right there.